Section 3 reads, "The supreme executive power of this state shall be vested in a governor, who shall be responsible for the enforcement of the laws of this state."
But those few words written in 1859 don't begin to describe the important political figure that the governor has come to represent, a political figure unlike any other in the state of Kansas.
I'm Bob Beatty of Washburn University.
And I'm Sarah Auguste with KSNT Channel 27 News in Topeka. In this program, The Kansas Governor, we take a look at the governor in a unique and, we hope, enlightening way by talking to Kansas governors William Avery, John Anderson, John Carlin, Mike Hayden, Bill Graves, and Kathleen Sebelius, and asking them to take away some of the mystery and aura that surrounds the most visible person in the state.
We'll also examine a role that has grown dramatically in the media age, which is the role of the governor as head of state and center of attention, not only in Kansas, but the face of the state nationally and internationally. It is a role that puts great demands on the governor's time and personal space and privacy.
And in this program, we want to find out more about the people themselves who end up in the governor's mansion. What kind of person becomes the governor of Kansas? What frustrates them and gratifies them about the job? And what do they think makes for a successful governor?
It is that combination of the personal and the political that we hope will help you understand more about the person who has become the chief political figure in the state, the Kansas governor.
I'm Kathleen Sebelius. I was inaugurated as governor of Kansas, as the 44th governor of Kansas in January 2003.
Hello, my name is Bill Graves. I served as the 43rd governor of Kansas from 1995 to 2003.
I'm John Carlin. I served as the 40th governor of Kansas from January of 1979 until January of 1987.
I'm Mike Hayden, and I had the privilege of serving as governor of Kansas from 1987 to 1991.
Hi, I'm Bill Avery. I'm a retired farmer from Wakefield, Kansas. I've had some opportunities to serve the people of Kansas in several different capacities, but the one that I am most recognized for, I was the 37th governor of Kansas. And I wasn't governor as long as some others, but quite a few things happened while I was governor, and they are pleasant to remember.
Hello, my name is John Anderson, Jr. I served as governor of Kansas, the 36th governor of the state of Kansas, from 1961 to 1965. And I enjoyed my service, and I thank the people of the state of Kansas again.
And I realized very early on that I really wasn't cut out to be a farmer. And in fact, I remember very poignantly a story. When we were in school, we had to read an essay, if you will, by Dwight Eisenhower, by President Eisenhower. He had a line in there that I'll never forget. He said, there is more to life than plowing a straight furrow. And that had a big impact on me, and I think probably gave me a vision to look beyond the farm, to look beyond maybe my own community where I grew up.
Where do governors come from? Well, in Kansas, they often come from small towns and farms, although more recently we've had a governor from a business background in Bill Graves. And Kathleen Sebelius is from a political background, with her father at one point serving as governor of Ohio. In this segment, we'll take a look at beginnings, political beginnings. What's interesting about these beginnings is the role of time and circumstance, and in some case, not doing what's expected by parents or family. Governor Hayden tells us that he always remembers a line by President Eisenhower that went, "There's more to life than plowing a straight furrow." And that to him, it meant he had a calling beyond the farm and his local community. So yes, governors certainly come from somewhere, but they have to make a first decision to leave that somewhere to get to the State House.
Lots of work, lots of fresh air, outdoor activity, lots of time in the barn. With the dairy operation, you know, it's 7 days a week. There's no day off. Cows are milked twice a day. I think my folks intended that I would get a college education, and it would be in agriculture, specifically in dairy science, and I would come back to the family farm and with my father for a short period of time, and then ultimately by myself run the dairy operation.
They were farmers. My dad farmed all of his life and milked cows, dairy cows, for a living, and worked his way through the Depression years of the 1930s by selling milk into Kansas City, Missouri. And I helped milk those cows from the time I was 5 years old until I started college.
I grew up, of course, on a farm just down the hill from here. But this area down here was in the Wakefield Elementary School District. So I went to elementary school and high school in Wakefield.
I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my father got involved in politics when I was 5. So I really grew up in a political family where I thought going door to door and putting up yard signs is what people did in the fall. He ran for council, he served in Congress, and he ultimately was governor of Ohio. The downside as a child is he was out a lot. He was always a public person when we were out. There were always people who wanted to talk to him and wanted to be with him, so that was a little difficult. If you were out to dinner, he was likely to be up shaking hands as opposed to being with the family. But I think my mother was great about making sure we knew what he was doing, how important it was. She was his best cheerleader, so I think there was a feeling not that we were being neglected, but that we were sharing him with other people and they needed him as much as we did.
My father, who was involved from the time I was born until even this day in the trucking industry, was gone quite a bit. He traveled. But I grew up in Salina, right across the street from the elementary school that I attended. It was called Whittier, and I thought that was just terrific because it always gave me access to the schoolyard and to friends and fun things to do.
And I decided then I didn't want to be a lawyer after I had these 2 or 3 courses. They resented my being there, I found out later. The first day over in law school, the professor came in, folded his hands and sat behind his desk and said, "I will now call the roll." And he sat there and called the roll without ever looking at anything. And I thought, boy, if this is what law school is like, I'm not sure if this is for me. Well, there were other reasons, of course, but that did shake me up a little bit.
Dad sold the business, called me, and I remember very distinctly, you know, being at my apartment down at KU and the phone ringing and my father saying, you know, I have news for you. We're selling the family business, which was really, you know, a devastating blow to me, because it's really what I thought I would do. It was sort of my safety net that was there for me, and I made a bad decision at that point. I pretty well walked away from graduate school, which in hindsight was not a very wise thing to do.
I was very fortunate in Vietnam in that I lived in the jungle for the better part of a year. We were in many difficult firefights. I was on the Cambodian invasion when President Nixon ordered us into Cambodia in May of 1970. In fact, I only had a few days remaining in the Army at that time. And I was fortunate in that I never got wounded, but I saw the horrible effects of war firsthand, and I never forgot that.
Every one of these individuals shares a background that involves years here in the Kansas state capitol, serving in elective office, serving in administrative capacities, and essentially getting to be a part of that small number of people who have a day-to-day understanding of the functioning of Kansas government.
Indeed, every Kansas governor since 1960 served in elective office before running for governor. John Anderson was a state senator and attorney general, William Avery, a state legislator and U.S. congressman, Robert Docking, mayor of Arkansas City, Robert Bennett, John Carlin, and Mike Hayden were all state legislators. Joan Finney spent 16 years as state treasurer. Kathleen Sebelius was a state legislator and state insurance commissioner. And Bill Graves didn't have to travel far when he went from Secretary of State to the governor's office.
The great thing about it was in the Capitol. So I like to tell the story that my first day on the job, I worked at the state Capitol, and my last day on the job, 22 years later, I was still at the state Capitol. And I don't know that there are many people that have that kind of opportunity.
It did feel like I was moving away from family and friends, because I was. I didn't know anybody but Gary in Kansas. I had no job. I had, you know, no circle of acquaintances here. So the first couple of months were difficult, forming new friendships, figuring out sort of where I was, getting established, finding a job, but I've never really regretted the move, and I've never regretted being here, and have since become a great Kansas fan.
And I'll never forget the day I had a crew getting ready to go out and bale hay. And we had the tractors and the wagons and the crew just ready to leave to go to the field. And here were these people from Clay Center down asking me to run for the state legislature. And I said, thought about it. I said, I criticized my father, who I was very fond of, for being away from home so much. And I've just stayed here, and it was kind of my plan not to leave. Well, they gave a lot of reasons why they thought I should run. I said, okay, I'll make a deal. If you will guarantee I won't have a primary, I'll probably consider to run. But I don't want to have to campaign in a primary and then possibly campaign in the general election. They came back in about a week, says, we got it set. You won't have a primary. Well, I said, I hope you know what you're talking about. It's a little hard to control, you know, who might want to run for the legislature. And they said, well, they were sure nobody would run against me. And that's the way it happened.
Well, the state legislature was really a timing issue. I had a neighbor and a friend who was the Democratic representative, lived a block away from me. I'd been involved in her campaigns. She decided in 1986 to run for statewide office and came to me and said, why don't you be the candidate? Why don't you run? And it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, there was no plan to run for public office, that I can assure you. There was an article about the legislative candidate for the Democrats that had moved out of the district we happened to reside in. I wasn't even aware of what district we were in, to be honest with you, and was no longer eligible. And they associate a dairy farmer with somebody who worked hard and they felt good about. Because there weren't any issues, I mean, that were dominated at all. It was simply a personality contest going door to door.
And there had been a long time incumbent in the insurance commissioner's office. Never had there been a Democrat, never had there been a woman. And a number of people said to me, you really should make this race. You should make a statewide race. It makes a lot of sense. There's an opportunity really to change the office from sort of an insider club where the industry provided all the money for the candidate to a consumer look. And it was kind of a leap of faith to make that run.
And I often think about when I went to Congress, we had 6 congressional districts. And, you know, I often, I was a new kid on the block. And so they all kind of just tolerated me for a while. They all, I think, thought I was young and too young to be in Congress. I don't know whether my physical presence meant much to them, but my being there meant something to them. And I don't say that unkindly. It's kind of natural that you, for those who've been there a long time, they think these whippersnappers that come back there that they don't know really what they're getting into and they aren't going to contribute very much, especially if they defeated one of their friends. It makes them hard to appreciate the new member. But the opportunity to serve in Congress is an opportunity. You have a perspective on national affairs and public life and issues of general consequence in the public.
And I remember calling the county chairman in my home county, who ultimately ended up being the chairman of my campaign even for governor many years later. And I said to him, I'm going to run for the legislature and I'd like your help. And I think I was 28 at the time. And he said, well, I'll help you. But he said, you know, we've never elected anybody under 50 before. And it was a hard-fought primary, and I think we won by 250 votes. So what it does show you is that while the power of the incumbency is important, that there's always room for new ideas.
Yeah, that's right. You know, the old saying is that political ambition's like a snake's tail, never dies till sunset. Well.
and so it wasn't something I dreamed of as a boy. It was something that I just worked up into. And I was in the right place at the right time. And that's a lot of politics, is timing.
I guess, I mean, you could have probably stayed in office up in Washington maybe for a long, long, long time. Why did you decide to come back to run for governor?
How many former members of Congress do you ever hear about?
It's you know, pretty special to have the opportunity to be the governor of your state. I think the first time I was sworn in, I remember my second grade teacher was in the crowd, and I thought, she's probably the most shocked person in the crowd today that Billy Graves has become the governor of Kansas, because I'll bet when I was in her second grade class, she would have hardly imagined.
So, in April of 1962, Governor and Mrs. Anderson, their children, and their Shetland ponies moved to the building behind me, Cedar Crest, where Kansas governors have resided ever since. And since 1962, Cedar Crest has come to represent the majesty and special nature of the governor. Special events are held here, including annual Easter egg hunts that draw thousands of children to the lawns surrounding the mansion. But this segment of the program isn't about the building, but wanting to get to the building and the process of getting there. The governor's mansion is a place, but it's also a destination. To Kansas politicians of all stripes, it represents the pinnacle of power. But while many dream of living here, few have successfully made it. What is the ambition that has driven so many to run for the office? How did they make the fateful decision to run? And what do they need to do to win the voters over? Did they jump on one issue and ride it all the way to Cedar Crest? Or did they win them over with a past record in a previous office? As we find out now, the answer is whatever works. And can anybody in Kansas grow up to be governor?
Of course. Of course. That's what it's all about. Any child that aspires to do that can become governor, but it takes a lot of luck, and as they say, timing is everything. And you have to be on a zenith in your career when there's an opening and it's tougher than all get out to beat an incumbent. And there have been a lot of people that aspired to be governor that the timing was never right for them and they never got to run.
I was never one that would have stayed doing something forever. There were folks in the legislature that had been there for 20, 30 years. That was not something that I would have ever been comfortable with.
I didn't have an epiphany. I didn't wake up one morning, probably about 2 years before the end of my second term as insurance commissioner. It became clear that I needed to decide what was next. I've always felt that there was an opportunity really to make a big difference at the state level, and there's certainly no office better to do that than the office of governor.
I think I can remember probably the moment when I knew I would run for governor in 1994, and it came as somewhat a surprise to me, and it was election night, general election night in 1990. And I can say it with a smile on my face, but I remember at the time feeling, a little bit overcome, you might say, with the notion that I'm looking at a 4-year, window or a path where at the end of those 4 years, I can tell already where I'm going to be, and I'm going to be running for governor.
And I was encouraged. I had a strong base in Topeka, and I hadn't made any enemies in the legislature. And, I've been around long enough. As I said a while ago, not many people remember who their congressman was, but they can remember who their governor was.
We thought we could do better, and we thought that there should be some changes made. And visited with people, and people visited with me. And I had several other people in mind that I thought would be very fine governors. And we all kind of talked together, and it was decided that perhaps due to my father's name identification and some of my governmental experience as city commissioner and mayor, and also some of my fiscal experience by being a banker in the insurance business and so on, that I might be the strongest candidate.
Once the decision is made to run, the hard part comes, winning. For some governors, such as John Anderson with the death penalty, John Carlin with utility rates, and Robert Docking with withholding taxes, one main issue helped them prevail. For others, their campaigns were largely based on their backgrounds, general themes, accomplishments, and personalities.
Well, I think, and I will always think this, that people vote for candidate A or candidate B more than based on political party or on issues. They vote on the person that they think they're most comfortable with, they like the best, that projects a personality that's pleasing to them.
Each of these individuals seemed to find an aspect of the public career that they had either had or intended to execute once they became governor that became strongly associated with their campaigns and with their success.
Well, the issues that were probably central, and the message that was central is I'll work hard on your behalf. I'm not tied to special interests or particular ideology, and I could back up those promises by a record.
And I think my campaign, I don't want to say slogan, but basis of my campaign was a job for every young man and young woman in Kansas.
Every crowd I talked to wanted to hear about the death penalty. And they'd clap when I'd tell them what I thought it ought to be. And I told them I believed in enforcing the law. And I tried a man in this county when I was county attorney and got the death penalty, and we hung him. They hung him with a rope.
And Paul Wilson came up with a fairly straightforward 30-second commercial of me dressed in sort of work-like clothes, jeans and a work shirt, on a freight dock at the back end of a trailer, talking about, you know, that my father taught me that you had to load it high and tight. And that's what I intended to do as a governor, was to insist upon efficiency and effectiveness in our performance. And it was almost embarrassing how the phrase caught on and took off. From that point forward, as I traveled the state, I'd go to a parade, and people along the parade route would, you know, they'd yell, they'd say, "Hey, Bill, high and tight, you know, load them high and tight." And, you know, I kind of laugh about it now. I almost get a little tear in my eye, but it was just wonderful. You know, I never would have imagined, and in fact, the day I knew we'd really struck a chord was when my opponent tried to sort of attack the theme. There was a very brief effort at a rebuttal, sort of along the lines of low and loose, and when that happened, I knew we were onto something.
We appealed to people with a grassroots approach, small town, agricultural based, concern about and a closeness to the land, and grassroots politics, if you will, really. And we also combined that with somewhat of a populist refrain.
That so many Democrats have been elected because the Republican Party's divided. That's how Joan Finney got elected. If the Republicans had, if Mike Hayden hadn't turned off so many rank and file Republicans, he wouldn't have gotten beat, but he had. And so Joan Finney took advantage of that, and Sebelius the same way. The severe, moderate conservative division within the Republican Party, which continues, is what, that split more than anything is what elected Kathleen Sebelius.
What I knew about Kansans is if you could get a message out, if they really believed you were on their side, if they believed you would work hard for them, they were willing to cross party lines and vote for the person and not necessarily the party. So that was my job, to make sure that I could get up above the dialogue about who's a Republican and who's a Democrat and talk to them about the issues.
And I remember I was eating pizza. I love pizza, and I knew it was going to be a long night, so I had sent out and had some pizza brought over so I'd have something to eat. So I'm sitting in my office at my desk, having some pizza, just sort of, you know, just keeping an eye on things. And Lou came in, and he handed me a wire service story that just basically said, Bill Graves is the governor of Kansas. And it, as you can tell, it still chokes me up today, because it was, you know, you work, and then all of a sudden, boom, you know, you get an affirmation that, and it's not exactly the environment that I thought it would happen in.
I could feel it when I was campaigning the last weekend compared to having worked almost 2 years campaigning. You could feel it. I go into bowling alleys, people recognized me, and they were positive. And before, I had to go in, shake my hands, explain who I was, tell them what I was doing, and they were polite. But Now it was like they were connecting, and they connected the issue with the person and the decision they were going to make on Tuesday, and I won.
There is a moment where you, in the back of your mind, you say, oh my God, I won. I mean, you know, this is for real now. We have to go and figure out how to do all these things that we know need to be done or that we have said need to be done.
And all of a sudden you've been elected to take the mantle of leadership for our state. And it's an overwhelming feeling. It's a very humbling feeling to think that enough people have trusted you to make you the chief executive.
You were honored as, I forget what they call you, #1 citizen or something like that. They all stand up and you go into the room, you know, you can't help but think, gee, it's nice to be recognized and all that. But the other side of it is you have these tough decisions you have to make.
You're never out of the public eye. You never have a chance to just relax because you have a responsibility 24 hours a day. Your family has to agree to that responsibility because it affects your children, affects your spouses. Your parents may wonder, why did my child get into this job?
Politically speaking, governors of Kansas don't just come out of nowhere. Kansas governors are almost always part of the State House family, meaning they've spent some time as a state legislator or in another elected state office. Still, as you'll hear, several governors tell us they're often surprised at some of the aspects of the job, especially at finding themselves elevated to state celebrity status. Upon being elected, governors soon learn that everyone in Kansas not only knows their name, but wants some of their time. Governors also bring to the office their own style, their own way of doing things. And in this segment, we'll also hear how Kansas governors viewed their style of leadership and why they thought that their style worked for them. Style and surprises in this segment of Kansas Governor.
Well, people often talk about executive style and whether executives are active or passive in their behaviors. I would have to say that governors in the state of Kansas generally, if they haven't had it before they run for office, they often have an epiphany once they are in office with regard to just how much power they have.
They definitely have different styles from what I would call almost policy wonks who wanted to be involved in all of the nuts and bolts of the budget, legislation, everything, and they range from that to those who didn't want to be bothered by any of the details. They wanted aides to present to them the why a law that came to them to be signed was good, bad, or indifferent, and make a recommendation, and they would follow that recommendation.
Well, Governor Anderson was more of a hands-off governor. He had an agenda. He set an agenda and then worked with the legislative leadership to implement that agenda.
I didn't enjoy it in the sense of just exercising power over someone and saying, you've got to do this because I say so. That never entered my mind.
Governor Anderson was probably more philosophical than the other two, perhaps. And I'll never forget his response was, Chuck, just remember, all change is not necessarily progress. And so he just declined to be bothered with other people's agendas if it was not his own.
You have to like people. #1, you can phrase that with a better academic definition. But if you don't like people, they're not going to like you. It's just that simple. And I was blessed with this genetic trend that enjoying being around people, you can enjoy being around people. It don't mean you have to go out to dinner with them every Saturday night.
Governor Avery, on the other hand, was a much more hands-on governor. One of the things that impressed me about Governor Avery during his tenure, which was from 1965 to 1967, was that he put the President of the Senate, the Chairman of the Senate and House Ways and Means Committees, the Speaker of the House, and Legislative Committee Chairman on a bus, and he toured every state-funded institution in the state of Kansas. He didn't miss a one.
William Avery was followed as governor by Robert Docking, the son of former Governor George Docking. Robert Docking served as governor from 1967 to 1975.
Well, Bob Docking is probably the best pure politician that's been governor, at least in my lifetime. He could meet people so easily and put them so at ease, and just develop tremendous rapport with people, and that's the kind of guy he was. He was just a very friendly, outgoing guy. He loved politics and he loved campaigning, but he didn't necessarily like the nuts and bolts of being governor. He would do he loved all the external things you do, of going to the ribbon cuttings and making speeches when the Rotary Club invites you and all that kind of stuff. He thrived on that stuff. He did not thrive on the nuts and bolts of state government.
Succeeding Docking as governor was Robert Bennett, who served one term from 1975 to 1979 and lost to John Carlin in his bid for re-election.
And Bob Bennett was almost the opposite of Docking. Both of them were very gregarious, outgoing people in private situations. But his public persona was of an elitist attorney from Johnson County who had put himself on a pedestal. This wasn't true at all, but that was the public perception of him.
I don't know if activist is the right word, but I certainly believed in taking charge. I wasn't shy about speaking up. I wasn't shy or uncomfortable about making decisions. And so I wanted to be involved. I had people that helped me work the legislature, but I was very actively involved myself. So I was very much a participant. I didn't exaggerate delegation. I can say that for sure.
The secret is, to govern, you got to be yourself. Whatever you brought to the table, those tools, that's what you want to use. That's what's going to be most successful for you.
But Mike had a stubborn streak in him. If you know Mike personally nowadays, he's a wonderful guy, friendly guy, joking guy, but that didn't come across to the public. What came across to the public was almost like I say, a person who had cut himself off from so many people and had developed what we referred to as the bunker mentality. And a lot of it was stubbornness on his part. I don't think he understood why people reacted to him as they did, and he didn't know how to deal with it.
And everyone does approach it in a different way. And the real truth is that there's no one way. Everybody brings their personality to the office. And so I brought that kind of no-nonsense approach to it, all business type. Pat Roberts used to say about Mike Hayden, he used to say, 2 forward, 1 back, feed 'em hot chow. That's kind of my style, was no nonsense, straight forward, here's what we've got to do, let's get the job done. And that has its pluses and its minuses, of course. You know, I don't have any regrets about that style at all. I mean, it was my personality. It was, as ultimately we got the highway plan passed and some of those things, it was ultimately the style. Sometimes it was needed.
Mike Hayden was defeated for re-election by State Treasurer Joan Finney. Finney served one term as governor from 1991 to 1995.
Joan Finney, as you might put it, was a political horse of a different color. And I say that because Joan did not conform to the norms of what politicians were supposed to be all about, and she didn't react to things in the manner that most politicians did. Joan was almost antagonistic toward the legislature, and it's tough to get things done in the legislature when you don't have a good working relationship with them. But Joan always struck me as having an attitude that was her against the world. The secret of Joan's political success was obvious. It wasn't to us in the media for a long time because we never saw it. Joan had the uncanny ability to remember faces and names of people all over this state. So Joan had amazing rapport with just, I don't want to use the term ordinary or common people, but just rank and file people. She had amazing rapport with them, and that didn't register on the political meters, and that was the secret of her success, and that formed her base that she could become governor.
I think there were some times where people wanted me to do things that I thought were too theatrical. They were too staged. And I must tell you, though, everyone's style is a little different. And I'm not suggesting mine's right and the person who happens to do well with a more theatrical or, you know, outgoing kind of personality is wrong. Whatever works is okay. It just, for me, I was probably maybe a little more low-key than some would have liked.
Governor Graves was successful as governor of the state of Kansas because he was a very people person. He cared what individuals would say to him.
And to a certain extent, I think a governor has to be able to check their own sort of personal ego at the door and let other people shine. Let other people have their moment in the sun. You don't have to be at the forefront of everything. You don't have to get the credit for everything.
It's always important to work across party lines, to put coalitions of people together. And what I know, having been in the legislature, is so much of that is personal relationships. You know, can you talk to somebody? Can you lift up the phone and have them visit with you, bring them into the office, learn about their kids and their families and their concerns and their constituents?
Most governors, even those with long political backgrounds, still find the governor's office full of challenges and surprises, the most common being the degree to which the governor is in the public eye.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Oh, I had a lot of surprises, but I don't remember what they were now. But there was a surprise every day, just about. But not one that in any position of responsibility you're going to have surprises and have to make decisions. I think that's a rather simple way to put it. You're going to have surprises, and they're not all going to be pleasant. And the decisions are sometimes hard to make. And in a very simple statement, that's kind of the way the governor's office is.
And one of the hardest parts for me was trying to hit that fine line between spending time on public policy, on real questions, and the ceremony. Because the demand for the governor's appearances are just absolutely overwhelming. I was not the best manager of time. I would let the schedule overwhelm me. In fact, I remember one time I said, one of my assistants asked me something, and I pulled out a 3x5 card, and I said, well, what does the schedule say? And she said, you mean you're going to let your life be ruled by 3x5 cards? And there's something to that.
I would say the surprises are that it is significantly more intense than I ever expected. There's something going on every moment, and there are 10 things that I can't do because there's just not enough time in every day.
If there was one thing that probably surprised me as a governor that I didn't perhaps expect, I had maybe a little sense of it, but is how proud Kansans are to have an opportunity to meet you, to see you, if you take the time to go to their community for their event, how, you know, it's a really special, important moment to them. And so, again, it's about how you carry yourself. You need to always remember that people value and find the interaction with the governor to be a very special moment.
The other, I think, piece of the puzzle that is a surprise to me is how visible this office is, and in some ways that's very good. People are so excited about, not me, but about meeting the governor, about introducing their children and grandchildren to the governor, about having me sign an autograph or have a picture taken, but you're never invisible.
It is awesome if you think about all of the responsibilities of state government and the fact that, you know, the buck does stop at your desk.
I remember Governor Graves saying one day, his mother had called and said, "I'm not sure about this decision, son." And I remember Bill saying, I said to her, "Mom, I'm the governor, not you, and I've got to make this decision."
And I did say this quite often, you know, if you don't like the way I'm doing, the job, then just run for governor, and you can be governor, and you can, make those decisions.
The challenge of being Kansas governor is most certainly to try to affect or deal with change and progress in a way that benefits the most Kansans. It sounds simple, but of course it's not. And in this segment, the governors will tell us some of their frustrations when taking on that challenge and also their satisfaction when they met it. We also asked the governors what traits they felt were essential for any governor, regardless of party, to have in office. You might be surprised that it's not a great command of particular issues that they say a governor needs, but instead what counts is character.
And of course, the oldest saying in the world is that there are two things you don't want to watch being made. One's sausage and one's legislation. But people do have the misconception that governors can pass laws, and they don't understand why it takes this long process to get something done up here.
The wheels of government turn slowly. And many times when you're governor, you see things that need to be done. But sometimes it takes years to actually get that accomplished.
You know, the governor can propose and suggest, but the legislature enacts and carries out the work.
Well, the partisan dialogue gets frustrating to have issues that are so critical to Kansans, like their kids' school or what happens with health care, break down into, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, you had this idea, so I don't like it. That gets a little frustrating.
I think the criticism from within your own party is harder to deal with than criticism from the opposite party, because you just feel it more, you just feel it more in your heart.
You know, I shoved on the conservatives a little bit, and they shoved on me a little bit, and it wasn't always the most enjoyable part of the job, but it was just the way things were.
When you talk about taxes, the only fair taxes, of course, are the one the other guy pays. So I knew that reappraisal would be a very, very difficult issue. I don't regret it. We did the right thing, and it's just one of the consequences of politics. I've always said this about politics. If you're afraid to lose, you should never run.
And I've told the people, even though the withholding tax defeated me, it was the right decision, and I would still make it. I might have put it off till after the election. I won't deny that. Had I thought about that.
We've been blessed in Kansas. We have elected people of considerable personal integrity and talent.
So you start with integrity. And in the absence of integrity, nobody can be an effective governor, or nobody can be effective in any field of endeavor.
If you don't like people, they're going to have to learn to like you. And if you're not honest and they find it out, they may forgive you, but they're not going to like you.
I personally believe people are ready for tough decisions. They're ready for the truth, ready to be told the reality.
I would say the next big thing is just figure out how to get along with people, how to bring people to the table. Can you talk to somebody? Can you lift up the phone and have them visit with you, bring them into the office, learn about their kids and their families and their concerns and their constituents?
And you need to give it, your very best while you're there, but you need to keep in mind that there is an end. This is not an entitlement. This is not something that you're, going to have forever.
In this hour, we've tried to take away a bit of the mystery about the job of governor of Kansas.
In the process, we've taken a glimpse at the human side to being governor and the frustration some have felt as they engaged in the political battles that marked their time in office.
It is a demanding job. It can be lonely at the top, and when something goes wrong in the state, the governor is usually blamed. But despite all of this, it is a job many Kansas leaders aspire to, because it allows one person to show leadership for the entire state, where one person can try to help millions of others lead better lives and accomplish great things.
Because of this, the governor will continue to play a central role in Kansas politics. And because of this, the media, the legislature, and the citizens of Kansas will continue to pay close attention, not only to the policies governors favor, but to the personal style and character they bring to office.
Rewarding. I enjoyed being governor of Kansas. If that's a reward, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being reelected and being accepted by the people for a second term. That says, in effect, you did all right the first term, so you get another one, and I enjoyed that.
Well, I hope they remember that we were all fortunate that we lived through some incredibly prosperous times, and during that time, we had the opportunity to do some wonderful things. I mean, I'm very proud of the list of accomplishments. We wrestled with tough issues like issues involving the welfare of children, how we care for people with mental health and mental retardation, developmental disabilities. We restructured the governance of higher education. We launched a new highway program. We cut taxes 6 years in a row, I think.
Well, I hope they think that I was on their side, working for them, and that I left Kansas a better place than I found it, that their kids have more opportunities, that the economy is prosperous, that we're in a better, more stable economic condition than we were when I walked in the door. That would feel really good.
I would want folks to know that we tried to honestly address the challenges we faced at the time, that we worked very hard to do what was best for the people, that we felt like our responsibilities were not just for the short term but the long term, that we had responsibilities to future generations as well, to do our best in the time in which we had the opportunity to lead what I always have considered the great state of Kansas.
I feel exceptionally blessed with having outside work to do that I enjoy doing. rather than sitting around twiddling my thumbs and watching some television program. And at my age, it's rather remarkable that I have the ability. I can't go out and do work like I could 50 years ago, but I can get quite a bit done. And I enjoy doing it. I don't feel sorry for myself. I kind of look forward to it. And I'm exceptionally blessed in that regard, because most people my age are in the armchairs or on the golf course. And now when I write to my friends, reporting something just like I've said to you, I add a sentence, and I still haven't played my first game of golf. And they write back and say, you gotta be lying. Nobody could have been member of Congress in politics as long as you were and not played a game of golf. But so help me, I haven't.
I think one is that you would hope that people, when it was all said and done, that they would feel that you cared about them, that you cared about the state, that you were in it for the right reasons. And that, I think, is the best you can hope for, is that when your time is done, that people will feel that way about you, that hey, he gave it his best shot, and he really did care about the right things, you know, on behalf of folks. That's really, you know, what it's ultimately about.